Hi everyone, it's Eínon once again, and today I'm in Stockholm, and we are today going to visit the Navy Museum in Stockholm. I already saw a very large artillery piece over there. We have an anchor here, and we are now going into the Swedish Navy Museum here in Stockholm. It's the entrance over there. We're gonna inside and see it. Okay, so we have here the entrance, and we are now going to the ship models exhibition. The museum staff were extremely nice, very cordial, and wow, believe me, this is gonna be good. I had to remove most of the environment sound because it was, as you've seen, a wonderful autumn day and the museum was full of little kids running and screaming everywhere. For those of you that love to go to museums, you know that's also always a problem. The museum has a very large collection of small models of ships from the all eras, but mostly from the 16th century onwards. We can see that it has some gallows, some of them very primitive, still without guns, and those already with guns. I'm just looking at this ship model and look at how many air intakes it has. They are everywhere on this ship. 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. Wow. So many. It also has a very interesting presentation of how it was cooling, the operation of loading a ship with coal. Very interesting idea. And then we have a few torpedo boats, some submarines as well. And you can see on this video the overall collection of modern warships from the 20th century. Some of them very interesting. They even have some parts from the submarine Ulven, which was sunk when it hit a magnetic mine, a German magnetic mine. They have some parts that were recovered from the ship, which was lost with all hands during the Second World War. And I was very, very amazed with this scheme. This is a very clever presentation to show the evolution of the submarines over the years. So I pretty much think that all submarines were built in Sweden, and you can see the evolution over the years from one model to the next one. In here we have a few smaller models, more patrol boats in this situation. And then we have a very interesting room, which was actually, from what I've read, the main reason for the creation of the museum. They had some of the remains from this ship, which was used as a yacht by the royals, and they decided to preserve at least the rear of the ship, and you can see some of the details inside. Very interesting presentation. And now we entered a new exhibition, and this exhibition showed a little about the ships that were recovered from the sea or were involved in archaeological investigations. Since the waters of the Baltic are extremely cold and the quantity of oxygen is quite low, most of the remains were preserved extremely well over the years. So you see from the views that everything seems to be left as if the ship sunk yesterday. And now let's go upward to the next floor. There's also a basement with some places for people to eat and a place for the kids to play and draw things about boats and so on, which obviously I didn't film. because there were little kids over there. And there's also a small... Okay, I don't know what's going on here, so let's get out. Let's leave them alone. And now we see here a dragon. Oh, very interesting. This exhibition is to talk about the shipping, about the trade over the years between the Swedish Navy, between different nations. This was a very clever solution to explain how the ships were used and what they shared or what they trade over the years with other nations. You can see the evolution of the ships from the first record. And then we see some remains, archaeological remains from the first boats, which were used on the ground. And you can also see the evolution of the ships around. You can see that most of them trade cereals and timber, food, and so on. And in this one we can see a few more modern ships, a few more pictures, and then we see that the ships now carry oil. Oh, and in this one it brings Volvos, of course, and Saabs from Sweden, bananas, cafe from Brazil, immigrants, and so on. This interesting presentation shows two ships, one of them a pirate ship, during the Great Northern War. There are pirate ships everywhere, and in this case they were also used during this war. You can see some people fighting over there. Very interesting and fun presentation for the kids. Oh, and this was one of my favorite ones. It shows the German U-boat U-46 sinking the cargo ship Hansa during the Second World War. Sweden was also a neutral country, like Portugal, but some ships were sunk by error or by mistake, and people were killed because of that. And also curiously, another ship also named Hansa has also a different presentation here. The cargo ship was making a voyage in the middle of a storm, and it was sunk by a Soviet submarine, also during the Second World War. The presentation with these curtains that give a sort of phantasmagoric environment was very thrilling. Kids were extremely happy and screaming in this room, so it was very difficult to film. This presentation shows and tells the history of this submarine, which sunk the Hansa. And until to these days, the Russians still refuse to acknowledge, although there are reports explaining and confirming that it happened. And the ship actually sank with a heavy loss of life. Only 2% survived the sinking. And until these days, their families, they still don't have any replies, or at least some sort of acknowledgement from the Russians about this. The museum also had a small restaurant that served some meals over there. Nothing here to explain. It had a very interesting decoration, as you can see, with the figureheads from the front of the boat. Before I left the museum, I noticed that they still have a small collection of guns here, so 18th, 19th century artillery pieces here, and some modern weapons as well. We have 3 120mm guns, which were mostly used on gunboats and some cruisers. More massive, we have a 270mm gun over there. We have the gun still here. These are very interesting. Some of them there are still on their rotating positions. Very interesting. So this was my visit to the museum. It was very, very interesting. One of the best naval museums that I've seen so far in Europe. And I strongly advise you, if you're able or if you're traveling into Stockholm, to make a visit. it's really well worth a visit. As I said, the staff was very nice. Everyone was super nice to the visitors, to me. They greeted us very well, give me a reply to my questions that I had. I really enjoyed this visit. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Thank you, and see you again next time.